Welcome to Between the Sheets, the non-judgmental podcast where we're going to cover various sexual health and wellness topics. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Zwanitzer. I'm a urology and sexual health nurse practitioner, and I love helping my patients and listeners discover and develop their most satisfying sexual experiences. Between the Sheets is here to normalize the conversations about sexual health and cover everything from basic anatomy to the most taboo topics and everything in between. Real talk, real pleasure, one episode at a time. So come on, let's get between the sheets. This episode is sponsored by Boston Scientific and its educational website on erectile dysfunction, edcure.com. One study estimated that more than 50% of men over the age of 40 have some degree of erectile dysfunction, which can be frustrating and confusing. Go to edcure.com to find information on erectile dysfunction and treatment options, including long-term treatment options offered by Boston Scientific. Boston Scientific does not endorse any statements or opinions expressed during this episode. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Between the Sheets. We're going to have a nice conversation here today with Bonnie Comfort, who is a psychologist, speaker, and author. She is an expert on marital therapy and frequently appears on podcasts and speaking on topics related to marriage and self-esteem. And she wants to embolden women to advocate more clearly for themselves. She has a memoir called Staying Married is the Hardest Part. And she has a first book that came out a while ago called Denial, which was a psychological thriller. So I'm excited to have you here, Bonnie. Thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Thank you for inviting me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long have you been working with couples in therapy?
Well, many years. I've been in practice in Portland, Oregon for 25 years. And so that's a long time. Yes.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
don't do only couples. I do a lot of individual work as well. But,
Okay, excellent.
a lot of marital work is done on an individual basis, sometimes more fruitfully.
Sure, sure. What is, maybe one of your most common threads that people come to you for when they're looking to improve their marriage?
They're usually angry with each other, and often they tell me they're coming to see me because they have a communication problem. But that
Yeah.
is rarely what it is. It's
Okay.
really that there's anger and resentment and
Mm.
distance going on under the surface, feeling unappreciated, misunderstood, and they are really frustrated with each other.
Yeah, yeah. What do some of the resentments stem from?
Feeling unseen and uncared for, feeling like there's too much competition between them for who does a lot of the work. If they have
Okay.
children, the work with children and home and responsibility, each one often feeling burdened because they are feel like they're doing the most and they're doing a lot, and
Uh-huh.
being able to express appreciation to each other has fallen away.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
the connection of feeling close and understood has fallen away.
yeah. And is that because they just kind of have a lot of other things going on and they become less intentional about their marriage? Or are you finding that it's like specific events have occurred that make this divide happen?
Both, both. I think that we do become complacent
Mm.
after a while about our relationship and may not tend to it. I mean, I think of a relationship like a garden. It has to be the bad stuff has to be weeded out. You have to feed it. You have to give it sun and water. And that means, being attentive to your partner, not forgetting to say I love you, not forgetting to touch the other person several times a day at least and express appreciation. And so it's amazing really how far those kind of small gestures can go and how lonely people feel when that they're not there.
Yeah. Do you find that this, I mean, obviously is not an overnight switch. Is there a common length of time that people really reach this kind of breaking point, or is it different for every person and couple?
I think, well, it's a little bit different for every person and couple, but I think there is a pattern. I mean, we start out being incredibly in love, seeing mostly the good stuff, kind of ignoring the bad stuff, and believing that this person is our mate and our soulmate and who we believe that person is. And then between years 3 and 7, I would say, disillusionment sets in and you see the other side. You see the aspects of the person you don't like. There's not as much forgiveness in each of you or making allowance for the things that are aggravating. And the bloom is off the rose, to go with the garden analogy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you feel disillusioned and disappointed. A lot of people divorce around
Mhm.
that time, between 3 and 7 years, because they have stopped believing this is the right person for them, and they're not able to bridge the gap. So I think, one of the things I wrote about in my book is that that's a normal pattern. It's
Mhm.
normal, between 3 and 7 years to be disillusioned, to discover that all those red flags that you ignored in the beginning are really waving. And there's a lot at stake sometimes in that. If people have children,
Mhm.
it's so costly emotionally and
Yeah.
financially to separate and divorce, and therefore so worth it to try to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know I've heard of the 7-year itch, so that makes sense to me with what you're saying with this 3 to 7-year
Yeah.
area of really difficulty. What are some things that people can do? Maybe let's start prior to that. So
Mhm.
when you're in that first, 0 to 3 years of marriage, what are some things that we can do to prevent even getting to that point?
Really good question. And I think it depends on the quality of your dialogue. Not everybody is good at talking about their
Yeah.
feelings and the relationship issues. I think in general, women are more trained to be
Mhm.
open and be able to do that. But there are a lot of men who in our culture have been raised to be tough and hold their feelings in and be afraid that if they talk about things that are upsetting them, it's too vulnerable and they're weak. And so being able to be tactful, but direct and honest about what's bothering you is one of the ways to prevent that kind of distance and deterioration. And I also think it's important to begin in the beginning to say, okay, we're going to emotionally keep house. We're
Mhm.
not going to wait until things get so bad that you don't even know how to talk about it because it's so big.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's one thing that I learned, because I've been divorced, and one thing that I've learned over my years since and going through therapy myself and trying to become a better partner is the communication factor and how important that is. And that sometimes it's more about not doing it in the heat of the moment, but saying, like, let's take a pause and then coming back to it when I've had time to process and can think rationally and speak more kindly.
Yes.
That's definitely something that I'm trying to maintain in my relationship.
Very wise, because hurtful words can never be taken back. Once the other person hears them, they just go in and they stay in your memory. And
Mhm,
so, how to choose your words carefully is critically important in how well you can negotiate difference, express your anger, express your disappointment,
mhm,
but also what you want to express is I miss you. I feel
mhm.
lonely for the good times we had. I want to try to fix what isn't working right so that we don't, so I don't keep going farther down that road. And I do think it's important to kind of practice that over smaller things that happen in the
Mhm.
first few years so that you get better at negotiating and expressing yourself without it being destructive.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Patients who are in that 3 to 7-year mark, they're starting to have these issues. It's starting to feel icky. Did I not choose the right person? What are they doing? What should they be doing to kind of figure out whether or not they're staying?
Well, that's 2 different questions in a way because and sometimes one of the couples, one of the partners goes to individual therapy because they really want to explore their own feelings and
Mhm,
think about, did I make a terrible mistake? Is this
mhm,
fixable? Do I really like this person? All of that. But when I see a couple together, my goal is to have them leaving my office feeling better about each other than when they
mhm.
came in.
Okay.
And that doesn't there's a lot of marital therapy that can be destructive in the sense
Mhm,
if a therapist lets the 2 members really dump a lot of anger
mhm,
without stopping to say, "Let's understand where your anger is coming from. what in your childhood has contributed to this. And that's really important because if you're able to have a dialogue with each partner in front of the other, they can develop more empathy for who they are married to.
Yeah.
And it's remarkable how powerful that can be. For example, I may say, I had a couple where the wife always felt like she was being second best or ignored.
Mm.
And when I asked her about her personal history, it turned out that when she was a kid, she had a brother who was the star of the family, and she
Mhm.
always felt second best. So she goes into an adult love relationship afraid that
Mhm.
that's gonna happen now, and when she feels ignored, that feeling comes up and it's angry. It's
Mm.
angry and it has a history, and it's the story she's bringing to this new relationship, which is not necessarily like that, and I have had 2 each of the pair be able to explore that with me out loud in front of the partner, and it's so freeing to realize you are reacting to an old wound and you are putting that defensiveness and that anger into this new relationship where it is not relevant, or at least you're exaggerating your response.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I love that you kind of take them back to work through that and that it's not always an issue within their current relationship. That's really interesting.
It's a trigger for them.
Mm.
We understand that word, but it's a trigger that triggers a much bigger than reaction than is appropriate to the present
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. So if they can kind of start to work through that past issue and
Mhm.
that hurt from then that can translate into working through it in their current relationship.
I think so. Certainly, each of one them being aware that this is something the other person struggles with helps. And I also think that it's in couples therapy, it's very valuable for each partner to be able to get underneath the anger and resentment to the vulnerability that is always there. The feeling like you don't really care about me. I don't feel like you really see me. I
Mm.
don't think, you want me anymore. And
Yeah.
those are the feelings that fuel the bad behavior, anger and resentment and having an affair, all of it. This
Yeah.
feeling of no longer being treasured the way you were in the beginning that was so intoxicating and wonderful.
Mhm. Yeah. When you have couples, or individuals, do you suggest that they do premarital counseling, early marriage counseling? Do you wait until there's a problem? What is your take on that?
I think it's interesting for a couple to go to counseling early,
Uh-huh.
even before marriage, and prepare themselves for how to be diplomatic, how
Mm.
to express what they need without getting ugly. And I think it can be incredibly helpful to do that. I know some people who have done that and haven't had to go to therapy later,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is really nice. But I think it's a skill you can learn.
Uh-huh.
And if you're learning it together, it is incredibly valuable, and I also think sometimes going to a weekend workshop that's kind of
Mm.
immersive, where you put aside everything else you're doing and totally focus on your
Mhm.
relationship and your partner, you can do a lot in a weekend couples
Yeah.
workshop.
Yeah. That's a great idea. I love that. Yeah. When I was early married to my first husband, we were very involved in our church at the time, and they had a marriage mentoring situation. And
Yeah.
you could be paired up with a couple who had been married for 10 plus years and you were a newlywed or something. And there were some really great conversations that came out of that. And, there weren't therapists or anything like that. They just, couples who
Mm.
have been there, done that, learned
Yeah.
and it was a really youth situation. You got to be really close with these people and learn some really great things from them. And so that might be another alternative too. If somebody doesn't have, a good quality therapist in their area, or they just don't necessarily want to do maybe like the regimented therapy or something, they could go around a different route. But I think you're right. I think developing those communication skills and conflict resolution
Yeah.
skills are so important because a lot of us didn't learn that growing up.
Absolutely not. I mean, I think in some high schools they're teaching it now, which is
Mhm.
wonderful. But, the concept of nonviolent communication is so helpful really in any relationship to
Yeah.
find a way to feel empathy for the other person before you start your accusations, before you start really expressing what you need to be able
Mhm.
to imagine what it feels like to be the other person and understand the other person's, early wounds, because everybody has childhood wounds, whether they're big or small, they're
Mhm.
there. To understand that, to understand how they made decisions about how you should behave in a relationship. Often it's modeled at home and it's not necessarily the best. And you can learn a new one from a couple like this. I think that's a fabulous thing that
Yeah,
you
yeah,
shared
it was a
like
really
that.
neat idea. That's really cool. Tell me more about your book, Staying Married is the Hardest Part. Tell me about that.
Well, I was very much in love with my husband as he was with me. And we had a long marriage, 33 years, until he died, which
Mhm.
was very heartbreaking for me because
Absolutely.
we adored each other from beginning to end. But
Mhm.
we also had a sexual incompatibility that
Mm.
made that area of our relationship sometimes a challenge. A lot of times it was fun and it was fine, but there were times when it was really upsetting to me and I was angry and I would say no. My husband had fetishes. He
Mhm.
liked to peek in windows and he loved to take photographs, and I was his model. I was the subject. He was deeply in love with me, and he wanted me to pose for photographs, and he wanted to peek at me outside the window and sexual poses, and I felt lonely doing that. I
Mm.
loved him, and sometimes it was fun, and sometimes I felt, pretty or sexy from
Mhm.
doing it, but a lot of times I felt um, let down, and and he kinda needed this in order to really be as excited as he wanted to be. So
Mhm.
we fought about this on and off for years.
Yeah.
And, also he would sometimes sexually shut down
Mm.
for long periods of time, and I would, kind of nag him or ask him, and he started saying to me, "I just can't do it right now. Go out and find it somewhere else and just don't
Mhm.
tell me about it." And
Mm.
so I
That's
wound up,
tough.
having some extramarital affairs, was not in love with those people. It was really for attention more
Mhm.
than the sex, and the sex was never that great. But I felt angry with my husband for pushing me away in that way. I wasn't mature enough to well, there really was no way to fix it.
Mm.
He either was shut down or he couldn't do what he couldn't sexually be with me the way I wanted to be. We compromised and it was fine. I used a
Mhm.
vibrator with him and it worked just fine. But the trajectory of our marriage changed over those decades. And in the
Mhm.
last 10 years we were together, we had come to peace with each other and he stopped nagging me to do what I didn't want to do. And when I did want to pose for him or put on lingerie, he was delighted and it was fine. And so it took a long time. Took a long
Mhm.
time for that to change and morph into something. So what I've written about in my book as my own marriage as an example is
Mhm.
that it's such a challenge to stay in the relationship and
Mhm.
try to work it out. And if you're deeply bonded and you still love the other person, it is possible. But sometimes it is the hardest part to tolerate your differences, to
Mhm.
tolerate the disappointing parts and stay. So,
Yeah.
thus the title.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate your vulnerability and sharing that. I think the listeners that we have on this podcast specifically will be really helpful to them. We have a lot of listeners who deal with mismatched libidos, mismatched desires,
Yeah.
mismatched kinks, things like that.
Yeah.
And it is very painful. And a lot of people don't know who to turn to, who to talk to, because it's not necessarily something that you want to bring up with your girlfriends
Right.
over coffee or wine or whatever. That's a very delicate situation.
It's embarrassing. Yeah, it's embarrassing. And I had a reading in a book group, a book club last month, and one of the women who'd read my book said to me, "I just wanted to slap you,"
What?
which kind of stunned me.
Yeah.
but it was what you sometimes might get from a girlfriend, like, "Why
Mhm.
are you putting up with this? Why don't you just get out?" And
Yeah.
it just doesn't appreciate the complexity of long-term love and how you can have a mismatch in one area sexually and
Mhm.
still love this person dearly and not wanna leave them, and so we kind of caught in this agonizing dilemma, which is hard to live with, and finding a way through it is very, very helpful.
Yeah.
And I do think also that, mismatched libido and mismatched sexual desire is pretty common in marriage.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
What are some things that we can help the listeners who are experiencing that? What can they start conversations with? Should they be seeking out counseling? What are your suggestions for people who are also going through kind of mismatched desires and libidos?
Well, I think people change over time, so a mismatched desire is not necessarily a deep problem in the relationship because everybody goes through phases where
Mhm,
they are, not feeling great or not so interested and then can be interested again. I think when you have a deeper mismatch like I had with my husband where he had a kink that I didn't and I didn't want
mhm,
that. I went at some point being a therapist, I went to see a therapist to talk about
mhm,
this and she was a very experienced, mature psychiatrist. And I spent 1 hour with her because she said to me, "I can tell you this, fetishes and kinks are not amenable very much to therapy. You're not gonna
mhm.
get anywhere." But, I mean, I used to tell him, "Go to therapy," and he went to therapy, but it didn't change that. She said, "It's not gonna change." So I
Hmm.
left there having a deeper understanding that if we were gonna stay together, we were gonna have to find a way to work around it. But
Yeah.
in this situation of mismatched desire, I think that happens very commonly in most marriages for some phases.
Hmm.
Like if one of them is exhausted from working, 12 or 14 hours a day, not necessarily up for it. If women are breastfeeding or they have lots of, kids hanging off them, the last thing they want is to have a guy pawing their breasts.
Yeah.
And also, women go through menopause or, hormonal changes happen or medical things happen. So there's lots of reasons why there can be mismatched desire. But I think emotional intimacy and physical
Mhm,
contact is the most basic and bonding aspect that can be continued, even if you're not
mhm,
feeling sexy, if you're not actually don't want intercourse or you don't feel like getting aroused. It's incredibly nurturing to have the person you love touch you, and in whatever way that, a non-sexual way that is so nurturing.
mhm.
And you can cuddle and you can, sleep together if you can sleep together.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think one of my favorite things with my partner is cuddling and just we have
Yeah.
such deep conversations and we jokingly call it pillow talk because it's always when we're getting ready for bed, but it is. It's just this time that we talk about things that are different than just what we did during the day. It's like, "Hey, I was thinking
Mhm.
about this memory from when I was a kid," or
Yeah.
"What do you think about this?" Or we talk about our 5-year plan or whatever it is, but it's so intimate because we're also cuddling during that time,
Yeah.
and it might be dark in the room and we're not even facing each other or making eye contact, but there's just this level of intimacy that we don't get when we're sitting at the dinner table talking over dinner or something.
And yes, it's something about being horizontal
Mhm.
and next to each other, and I got goosebumps when you were talking about that, because I have had that experience with my
Mhm.
husband for so many years that he would get sometimes it was in the afternoon, he liked to
Yeah.
nap, and he would say, "Come and lie down with me," and I would lie down with him, and I put my head in the crook of his
Mhm.
arm, and we would talk and talk about anything, and it was
Mhm.
so emotionally intimate to be just kind of sharing our thoughts about whatever.
Yeah.
And to me, that is so bonding.
Mhm.
And it doesn't require the guy to have an erection or the woman
Mhm.
to have an orgasm that quick.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And, we talk about that a lot on this podcast too, is that intimacy doesn't necessarily equal penetration. It doesn't necessarily equal having an orgasm. There's a lot of different ways to enjoy each other and to be
Mhm.
intimate together. And whether those are because you're just overtired for today and then things just aren't feeling right, or medical issues, like you said,
Yeah.
things outside of our control. But it's amazing to me just that closeness and that connection that you can get with other forms of intimacy, and I think society wise, we put so much emphasis on P and V and orgasms
Yeah.
that everybody thinks that that is what is sexy and that is what is intimate. And I have found much more intimate situations without penetration than with it.
Yes, I have had the same experience of feeling to feel seen and known and to share your thoughts and to have a reflection back from you and an equal sharing. It's the best. It's being known and cared for and going through life with somebody, feeling seen, witnessed. And like I have a niece who she and her husband have a hot tub and they have a ritual every single day at 5 o'clock. They get in the hot tub or just maybe 15 or 20 minutes and they talk.
Mm,
And it's incredibly bonding. It's
yeah.
so nurturing and, gives you a sense of peace with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about just like my friendships and, relationships with family members, and we don't have that level of physical intimacy, right? Because that would be inappropriate in those relationships. But, the conversations and the level of connection that you can
Mhm,
have in those relationships, I feel like is mirrored in a romantic relationship
mhm.
when you take the time to have those conversations and that intimacy outside of physical sex.
Yes, I think so too. And I think it's nurturing for both of you in
Yeah.
that way and to feel it just so deepens the connection between you to
Mhm.
know what the other person is thinking and
Yeah.
wanting to share it with you.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Do you have patients that come and see you and kind of their biggest pain point is their sexual health and their sexual relationship?
I don't think usually that is the complaint that's front and center.
Mhm.
It's in there,
Yeah,
because what happens when you feel angry and distant for other reasons, then you disconnect sexually and it's a problem. But I haven't had too many who are specifically coming because our sex isn't good and we want to fix it. I mean,
yeah,
a lot of people who have that go to specifically sex therapists, and
sure.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Sexual connection is fragile in a way. We are all fragile. We have ways in which we feel shame about our body or our performance or what goes on inside of us that we may or may not want to share. I mean, some people, women particularly have a very strong sexual fantasy life
Mhm.
and usually a fantasy that leads to orgasm. And they may have never told their husbands about that. It depends on, how safe they feel to
Mhm.
reveal that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I haven't seen, uh, too many couples where that's the front and center thing, and it's always in there, though.
Yeah.
Always,
Yeah.
when
Well,
a
it makes
relationship is
sense.
not going. Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes sense if you're not communicating well, you're starting to be resentful, things like that, that you would back away from that intimate connection. So that does make sense that it's part of it, but maybe not the center star of what brought them in.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so interesting to listen to you talk about this because it's so important. And it's just, I think sometimes we take for granted our closest relationships and we don't put the effort in where we're going hard at work, we're making these connections to sell things or do whatever. We make a priority for girls' night to hang out with our friends. And when we kind of take our marriages, our partnerships for granted that, well, this person's just going to be there, so I'll get to it later. How do we shift that priority and make our partner and that our romantic relationship center stage so that we take care of that first?
I think the best thing is for each partner to be on the lookout for signs that things are not going as well, on the lookout for signs that your partner is distant or doesn't want to engage or doesn't want to have sex or wants to spend more time away from you. And that is the time to stop and say, hey, let's have an evening together. Let's talk about our relationship. And sometimes, the last thing a guy wants to hear is, I need to talk to you.
Yes.
But if you can make it, not so heavy a thing and not starting with a criticism, that to me is the thing to monitor
Mhm.
signs that you're getting more distant, that things are not going well, and then deal with it soon. Don't
Yeah.
let it go on for too long. And,
Yeah.
couples in their early 30s, newly married, often are working really, really
Mhm.
hard. They're working to establish themselves financially, to establish their careers. And it's easy to start taking the relationship for granted, to come home exhausted,
Mhm.
or they're both working from home in different rooms online.
Yep.
And there gets to be less and less. So I think we have to be intentional about it. I don't necessarily think it has to be date night. I think
Mhm.
it can be, let's carve out 15 minutes today to just connect and sit and hold hands or tell me how you're feeling today. What is it that's going on? And if you have a relationship like that, where that has been there from the beginning, it's pretty easy to
Mm.
fix. It's pretty easy to reconnect a partner. And maybe, it's not just men who are not necessarily experienced at talking about their feelings. There's plenty of women
Mhm.
who don't know what they feel inside and just
Mhm.
want to focus on tasks and external activity. And so, that's not, it's not a one-way street. And
Mhm.
it is important to be able to think about that before you really get into relationship trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that is such a great advice to, be watching
Yeah,
to see
watching.
when things change and
Right.
pay attention to that. Yeah. I also think it's really great to, pay attention to what the other person might be struggling with as far as, do I just need to pick up some slack today because
Mhm,
they had a bad day? Should I grab their favorite cup of coffee while I'm out today?
mhm,
Or should I throw in the laundry? Something to just kind of ease their burden when you notice things are difficult
mhm.
or they're having a bad day. Because I think for a lot of people, that speaks volumes. And then maybe if you do something like that, they will have those 15 minutes to spend with you and to connect with you.
Well, you're touching on something important, which is the concept of love languages.
Mhm.
And people feel, different ways about how they want to be loved. There
Mhm.
are some people who love nothing more than to have a partner take care of those things, take out the garbage, go to the grocery store, make dinner. Any of those things they feel so grateful for it and so glad and feel so loved. Other people, that doesn't matter to them at all. They
Yeah.
want the words, they want the physical touch, they
Mhm.
want meaningful conversation. So it really is helpful for each partner to know what the other one experiences feeling loved. And often they're not the same. So
Yeah.
their love language isn't the same. So being able to do what the other person wants instead of
Mhm.
what you would like is a great leap forward. But
And
the
it's
other thing that the Gottmans talk about, their famous marriage lab in Seattle. They talk about the fact that every single day there are moments where one partner may make a bid for connection with the other. And at that, the other one has the opportunity to recognize it and respond or turn away.
Mm.
Just something like, "Oh, I'm not sure I don't know what to wear today."
Mhm.
The other person can say, "Well, what are you thinking about? Show me your choices." Or they can say, "Whatever you wear is fine," and leave the room. And that's a difference in how the quality of the relationship
Mhm.
goes. Or just, "I'm feeling lousy today." Well, have a drink.
Mm.
So shutting out of what the other person's wish to be seen and heard is damaging to the relationship in micro ways, and it accumulates over time. And it's so smart to be aware of that. My partner's asking me to connect in some way. I'm going to do it.
Yeah. That makes total sense. I
Yeah.
love that you just brought that up because I think it's so easy to blow past those moments.
Yes.
Yeah.
So easy.
That's such a great example too. Like, what should I wear? What looks good on me or something like that. It's
Yeah.
because I do that all the time. What kind of meal are we going out for? Should I dress nice or should I throw on a sweatshirt? Yes, absolutely. Well, I think that this has been a fabulous conversation and that our listeners are definitely going to have some great nuggets to take home from this. How can people be in touch with you and what kind of things do you have to offer?
Well, I'm really not in practice anymore, so I can't do any direct patient care, but I am available for conversation, I guess. My website is bonniecomfort.com, and you can find me there. And I am going to be starting a Substack talking about observations about love and other vulnerabilities. I'm writing essays that are posted on Psychology today, so if they want to
Okay.
see what I'm writing there. So
And your book is available all over the place, I'm sure.
it is. It's available anywhere you can buy a book, you can buy my book.
Excellent. And that
Yeah.
staying married is the hardest part. So that's fabulous. I love that. Bonnie, thank you so much for being on here. I love the fact that you're a therapist and your last name is Comfort. Like you're bringing people comfort. It's like you were made to do this.
Well, I've had some people say to me, "Did you make that up?"
That's so great. I
Yeah.
love it. What a fabulous conversation today. And definitely everybody go find her book and read this for some good tips and tricks on how to have the healthiest marriage and to work through those tough times. Thank you for listening to us again. Don't forget to check out reviveish.com for all your health and hormone needs. And we will see you next time. Don't go forget, go have some fun between the sheets.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. It's been wonderful, wonderful
You're
conversation.
welcome. Thank you for joining us and exploring sexual health topics here on Between the Sheets. New episodes are available every Wednesday. Please subscribe and rate our podcast so we can reach more listeners. And don't forget to tell your friends, partners, and anyone who will listen about Between the Sheets. Send any comments, questions, or stories to podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. It's all one word, podcastbetweenthesheets@gmail.com. Thanks for listening and go have some fun between the sheets.